So can I ask if there are any questions? We do have mics and everyone's so organised. That's fantastic. Here we go, down over here, this gentleman. Thank you.
Okay. Howard Young. Howard Young, again, Butte Council. I think you may have already answered the question, but local development plans have always been an issue about getting people involved. You said consultation fatigue. Community plans go beyond physical planning and local development plans, and place plans seem at the moment to be specific to parts of a wider local authority area. Is the future that all merge into one, so we get the joined up government that we keep getting told about? So no local development plan, no community plan, no local place plans, but one big plan that covers everything.
I think, slide forward a bit so you can actually hear me. I guess the planning structure that we use, so the documents that lay it all out, don't really matter that much if we have the view of the individuals building up to neighbourhoods, to communities, to the full area across all of the partners. Ideally, what we want is a single document that lays all of that out and lays it out in levels and tiers that make sense for the different needs of different populations and services. We're a long way off of that now, but I think we're definitely heading in the right direction. And for our residents in particular, the document doesn't really matter, and I'm not particularly fussed about whether people go and read the documents or not, as long as they understand the principles within it and what it is we're aiming for, and they understand the value that all of the services place on their input to it. So having the documents written and having as many of them as we do just now, or as few of them as we're aiming for, won't really matter in the longer term.
Yeah, an interesting one. We're the ones concerned about the documents.
Yeah,
yeah.
Absolutely.
Colleagues from North Ayrshire, what do you think about that?
No, I would just share that point of view. I mean, whether that's the future of community and development plans, I don't know. But the way that we've worked it is to try and make them community focused, so that the way that they're interpreted and used is is widening. So yeah, it's not about the documents as such. It's more about how they're framed and focused and aligned.
Gerard, I'll put you in at the deep end to give a bit of a national perspective on that.
Thanks. I think it's been long-held frustrations that we've continued to, I suppose, deal with multiple planning documents, multiple planning strategies that we sometimes feel at a local level through community planning, etc., that we're having to juggle so many things and have them focused in the one plan, obviously through local outcomes improvements plans. We've got other things around kind of the public health review that's going on. We've got work with the health and social care partnerships and their localities that they deal with. But I'd agree with colleagues. I think what we have to do at a local level is we deal with it in our day-to-day jobs, and increasingly, as Amanda said, it's that the public really don't care what the planning documents are. They just want to be engaged in the process, and they want to see the delivery, and they want to see the benefit. Maybe we do worry too much that there are so many planning areas, because it'll probably always be like that. You'll still have policy agendas that will be driven by their own plans. So I guess it's our job to deal with that, try and rationalise it as much as we can. But at the same time, I think the focus, and you've seen through the presentations this morning, must always be about the people, the communities, because that's the only way that we can actually really look at reducing inequality.
Can I ask a simple supplementary? Does it need third-party rights of appeal to make it work?
I think that's perhaps going way into a technicality of the planning bill that is a bit unfair on everybody else. So we can take that conversation off to a coffee. Do you have any other questions for the panel? Thank you.
Hello, I'm Caitlin McCordy from East Lothian Council. I was interested in what you were saying about engaging some of the members of communities that are not the well-kent faces, because I think we've all got experience of the same people being involved in multiple forums. So have you got any tips and suggestions for how you overcame that in your areas? How you engaged with people with lived experience of inequalities?
Yeah, I mean, it really is a problem, and it's an issue that all local authorities will face. Because I manage the communities team, we are out working in the community every day. We're out walking the streets every day. So there is a level of trust that gets developed over time there. And the neighbourhood approach, we're looking at spending about 12 months in these neighbourhoods. And in some areas, we're working with partner organisations that are already there, and we're trying to buddy up with them. Where there's active community participants, then they make the introduction. But there are other areas, for example, where you've got a couple of local mums who want to make a difference to a play area. So we'll engage with those local mums or those parents and try to encourage that discussion. Then they bring on other people to join the discussion. And it's that way, instead of, there's always the option of going through the community council and the established groups, and we'll do that as well. But it's how do you get to those other people? And I think it's that trust, but it takes time. So we need to manage expectations as well within the council that these local neighbourhood plans will take a long time to develop.
Can I add to that? Yeah. I think just one of the things that's been mentioned in passing through the presentation so far is the wider opportunities for getting people involved, like participatory budgeting, and that's been a great opportunity for bringing in some people that we didn't know before, real grassroots community activists, people who are those anchors that people go to in the local neighbourhood when things are happening, but don't join traditional community organisations and haven't really been known to services previously. They're not our usual suspects. They're not the people who come out to give a view in a wide consultation, but they're the people who make things happen in neighbourhoods, and the opportunity to influence decision making through PB or the local governance review is the way to grab those individuals and hopefully keep them engaged by showing them the value of what we're trying to do going forward.
Can I pick up on North Ayrshire perspective? We've also been doing a lot of positive work in terms of PB and using those PB conversations to talk about wider issues as well. Certainly it can be a good hook to get people into the room when there's money on the table, obviously, but also where there's scope for them to influence mainstream budgets. We've taken a pilot approach for our grounds maintenance budget in North Ayrshire, so people have been really interested in what is the grass cutting regime going to be in the local area, what will the planting be, and we use that as a hook to get people to have those wider conversations. Another mechanism that's helped us is having all our consultation information in the same place. So our community planning website has a consultation calendar where we host all that information together. So we as officers can try and join up that activity, and people, if they're interested and respond to consultation, they know where to go to.
Yeah, and just to highlight as well that the Improvement Service and the Scottish Scottish Centre for Community Development Centre, sorry, keep getting their name mixed up. We did a project with them recently with all CPPs across Scotland. And as I said at the Community Planning Network about 4 or 5 months ago when we were looking at the stock take that we did of the WIPes, I'm kind of glass half full in all of this. Is I think there's a lot of really, really good activity going on across the country, and hopefully we'll start to capture that through that report, and certainly from the event that we held recently around that. So there is a lot going on at the moment. I sometimes tend to think that we're stuck in a rut with it. You know, you talk about the same old faces all the time, but I think there's some really innovative and really kind of good things going on at a local level, and I think the emergence of locality planning has really helped to kind of foster that, and I think it's something we really need to build on, and hopefully through that work we'll be able to develop that.
And I certainly think for planners, it's one of the key reasons for getting in touch with community planning colleagues who are already out doing that and building those links. So don't go off and repeat the process because it's already happening. I think we had, thanks, Dorothy.
Hi there, Dorothy McDonald from Clyde Plan. Thanks for the presentations, two really exemplary, great examples of joined up activity. And my question's about, well, essentially triggered by conversation, but a slide that Morna had up, where on the slide you had the strategic management team and a place-based approach mentioned on the slide. But I suppose I'm coming from a place of my experience in planning. We often, I think it's fair to say, we don't feel we've got a lot of influence often. So it seems like colleagues in community planning, just that point you were making, Irene, seem to have a little bit more influence. That's the way I perceive the balance of influence. But how does that process work in terms of your strategic management team in Ayrshire and the place-based approach? You know, 'cause the old adage, follow the money, seems very relevant here.
I think it's certainly helped that our outgoing chief executive has been the chair of our strategic management team and has really been our champion for community planning in North Ayrshire, and she was really committed to the locality partnership approach from the outset, and she was really willing to take that risk. So that definitely helped to kind of set the tone for the wider partners. We have mechanisms in place that link, structural mechanisms in place that link our locality partnerships to our management structures. So we've got kind of reporting mechanisms, we've got some officers that go to both groups. So that's kind of one side of it. But I think the other side of it is the relationships and the communication. And constantly keeping everybody in the loop is obviously it's a lot of hard work, a lot of industry, but constantly making sure, does everybody who needs to know what's happening at a local level know that at a senior management level? What is the relevant stuff that affects strategic priorities? And as a community planning team, that's our responsibility, is to be that information conduit. So I think it's something about balancing between having kind of technical processes and structures in place, but also developing those relationships and communication channels.
So Neil, how involved do you feel in that process?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting point, and the locality approach certainly had a lot of clout when it was established, and it's certainly maintained that. But back to the point you were making, Irene, is that we didn't pretend or try to recreate that with with the development plan to be able to get access to strategic partners or to community representatives. We actually just used the locality partnership, so we will go along and present as and when we need to, and that gets the views of the communities, and we can, because the coverage is whole area, we know that when we do that, we can do that in an equal manner, so that some communities aren't disproportionately benefiting out of it. And the management team that sits above that and has strategic direction took. Well, that's where the light was set anyway, but it's also how we decided on strategic matters in the development plan. So population decline, for example, the strategic organisational approach to that wasn't just North Ayrshire Council. It was the partners of the Health and Social Care Partnership and the Police and Fire and all the other community partners, and that fed down. So again, it's back to the point of it's the output that matters, and the alignment was for us to arrange the existence of locality partnership, and that setup was invaluable for us. We couldn't have achieved what we did in development plan without that being there.
Amanda, do you have a similar setup that planning has been able to tap into and use in the LDP?
Yeah, absolutely, and I think the fact that we adopted a priority around about flourishing, which was very much about economic development and regeneration, investment in some of our communities that were really deprived, and looking at the physical infrastructure that was required to attract new residents to the area, to attract employers and investment in housing development from private builders, was a real help in terms of getting that place focus in the centre of everything that we were doing. But having the opportunity through the flourishing theme and at the main partnership to have Anthony along to talk about what's happening with LDB2, to make sure that everybody around that table understands everything that's happening and is on message, has a common understanding, has a shared language, so that when they go out and talk about their individual areas of responsibility, they're using the same language as we're talking about at the strategic level, has made a huge difference to the buy-in and to the pace at which we've been able to move.
Yeah, and just to echo that, in Western Bartonshire, development planning has a seat at the actual partnership board, it has a seat at the steering group board, has a seat at the Community Alliance, which is a wider group of all our communities and various, not just your community councils, various other groups like our disability groups. We even right down to your community strategic group. We sit on all of it, we go to all of it. It is a joined up approach. So planning and development planning in particular has a very powerful seat, but it is part of community planning. That's the way we approach it. It's not different styles of planning. It's just the one thing, and that's what our neighbours and partners and our communities recognise. So we kind of tried to do that.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions? Yeah.
Just relating back to a couple of questions ago, Fiona Jackson from Loch Lomond and the Trossachs National Park, Sustainable Development Advisor. We've been talking a lot about communities, bottom-up approach, and the infrastructure with all of these people who are paid to do this work. And I was really pleased to hear Elaine was the only person that really mentioned, she didn't use the term community development, but did talk about the long-term resilience outcome approach of how to go about those sorts of outcomes through a community development approach. And I'm just wondering about what the speakers think about that sort of third partner well, one of the other partners in the partnerships we're all talking about here, which is the way communities can develop capacity and resilience, and where our funding is going in terms of community development, and where within your organisations.
Do people know what community development is? Does a Scottish Community Development Centre have any part to play in this type of activity? Sure. We're in the fortunate position that we've got locality coordinators, who I suppose in old money are community development workers, and they are aligned to each of our 6 localities. So that's a really invaluable resource for us. And they know the people, they know the groups on the ground. And I think having a mechanism to bring a variety of community groups in a locality around a table in itself has been a real benefit, and it's maybe helped to fill some of the gaps that we've got in terms of that community development resource. For example, in the Garnock Valley in North Ayrshire, so you've got Dalry, Beath and Kilbirnie, which are 3 very distinct towns in the same valley, as the name would suggest, but all of their own unique identities, and are very clear on that. Having the locality partnership approach has allowed those mechanism for those community groups to really come together for the first time, and they themselves are taking lots of things off table. It's just giving them a mechanism to speak to each other, to support each other, and do more joined up working across the 3 localities. So definitely having a community development resource helps us with that clear identity aligned to each of the localities, but also supporting community groups themselves to obviously come together and share their experiences has been positive for us as well.
I think it's a really well made point, to be honest, and it's a notoriously difficult issue to deal with, and it's an ongoing issue. We work through the Your Community initiative to work with a range of different partners. So we've got our Working for Your colleagues, employability, CLD, etc. We work with the police and the fire service, local CBS, and all of those groups or services come together to support the work that we do. But there isn't a huge budget for it. It is an ongoing issue. But the key thing that we're trying to do through the empowerment of local communities is to build that resilience and make sure people understand that they have the power, and there are tools that they can utilise to make a difference to their local communities. And if they can do a wee bit towards it, then our services can support and we can achieve more together. But it is a long-term vision. And as I say, there are those communities that are already doing it and seeing the benefits for themselves, and they just need a light touch approach, but those other communities need more investment through our time. But any more funding available for that area would be appreciated, obviously.
My own perception going across Scotland is that there is an issue around the fact that with budget cuts, one of the first things that got cut was community development and the staff that were available to do that. But in many ways, we've got an awful lot of frontline staff that are almost doing that part and parcel of their role, and it's perhaps promoting that. I don't know, Gerard, what's your perception across Scotland around community development and availability of that kind of support?
Sure. I probably can come at that from 2 perspectives. One is just the experience with working in the improvement service in the last couple of years, but previously in Eastern Partnership Council, and one of the biggest eye-openers for me was back in 2012 when we joined up community planning and the community capacity side of CLD. And you think you know it, you think you know engagement up until you actually work with people who actually know what they're doing. And to have that as part of community planning was invaluable to us in terms of how we then built trust up with communities, but also the expertise when you're developing this notion of place and how you get people to work together and empower communities. It was totally different and a totally new approach. So for me, there's a huge value in doing that, and I think we've seen an emergence of structures in the last 3 or 4 years that do start to kind of marry those 2 areas up as well. But from that, you were then dealing with CLD practitioners in the kind of national networks, and there was a real sense that those were the areas when it came to budget decisions were being cut. It was one of the first ones. And I think through the emergence of the Community Empowerment Act, we probably have to reconsider our approach and think about where the resources lie, because if we are focused and we are serious about co-production and enhancing capacity and empowering communities, you know, there's people with the skills to do that, and I think we really need to think about, well, where do the budget decisions go, because, you know, you talk about prevention and early intervention, reducing inequalities, you need to have the people on the ground that know people, but know what happens in an area, know what happens in a community, so you can start to make those links. So I think for me it was invaluable, and I would be a big advocate of that kind of way of working.
Good point, I think, to stop there, to thank all of our speakers and all of those that have asked questions, and we'll come back after a team coffee break at 5:02, if that's okay, and proceed with things there. But in the meantime, we should thank all of our speakers.